Hey guys, before you start drawing today, make sure you check yesterday's assignment on Google Classroom for any feedback and fix any issues. Today, we are going to be starting with how to draw the nose. I have printed out my picture for you guys to take a look at it, just that half sides. You don't need to print your picture. I just have it printed because it's easier for you to see than me having just my Chromebook screen open and you guys looking at my Chromebook. So this way you guys can see exactly what I'm looking at when it comes to drawing. For today, you need your drawing from yesterday, you need a pencil, and you need a piece of scrap paper. You can see my little piece of scrap paper right there. It doesn't need to be a big piece, it can be an index card, just a torn piece of paper, it can be an envelope, it just needs to have a flat edge. What we're going to be doing with this piece of scrap paper is we're going to make some measurements on our paper. Because yesterday we drew those dividing lines, but we just kind of took a guess as to where they are, and everyone's spacing of their facial features is slightly different. Some people have noses that are longer, some people have noses that are shorter, they have a bigger gap between their mouth, a smaller gap between their mouth, etc. So we're going to really measure those lines out and make sure that we actually drew our lines in the right place. Once again, you're going to be using your Chromebook instead of a picture to do this, but you're going to take that piece of scrap paper and you're going to measure the size of your eye. So this is the size of my eye, and I'm just going to write eye drawing so that I remember that that gap on that paper is the size of the eye in my drawing. Then I'm going to do the same thing in the picture. I'm going to mark a line on either side of his eye in the picture, and I'm going to write eye photo so that I remember how big his eye is in the photo. When you're drawing a portrait, you want to use the eye as a unit of measurement. So we're going to start with measuring the gap between the eye and the bridge of the nose, or that dividing center line. So if I take a look at this measurement, it's about half of the width of his eye. So there's the length of his eye, and this is about half of that length. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on our picture. We're going to use the eye drawing measurement and make sure that that center line is about half of that eye length. My line was pretty perfect, so I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to darken that line a little bit. And I'm going to darken all the way up and all the way down. Okay, and that's just a good way to double check. Next, we're going to start looking at where the nose goes. So this actor, Clive Owen, has a little bit of a longer nose, so I want to make sure I put the nose in the right place. So I'm going to go from the corner of the eye, and I'm going to measure how far down does one eye get me. It does not take me to the tip of the nose. I need another half of an eye to get all the way to the tip of that nose. So now I'm going to go back into my drawing, and I'm going to measure my eye drawing, and I'm going to go down one full eye length, and then I'm going to go a half of an eye length again. So half an eye length again puts me a little bit farther down than when I put the line yesterday. So that means that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the line where it actually belongs, and I'm going to erase that line that I had yesterday, which is why I had you guys draw really light yesterday. Okay, so that gives me that length down to the eye. Make sure that you don't confuse the eye photo and the eye drawing. On the drawing paper, you always use the drawing. On the eye, or on the photograph, you always use the photo. Next, we're going to measure the line for the mouth. So I'm taking a look again at how far down is his mouth from his nose. And on my paper, it's about 3/4. Okay, so his mouth is about 3/4 down for that center line. So I'm going to mark on my paper about 3/4 down, and I'm going to draw a line, and that is where his mouth goes. And my mouth was way off. It was way too high. So I erase that line, and then I'm just going to darken up where that mouth and those lips go. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the nose next, and I'm going to really make a detailed nose. On your Chromebook, you can either draw a line literally in the Google Slides, or you can just kind of make a note of it, but you want to see how far out that nose goes. So I drawn a line on my paper with how far out the nose goes, dropping down from that eye. So now I know that my nose on my drawing comes from about here on my eye, and it just drops straight down, and that's how wide his nose is. So I know that that nostril is going to be out there. That's going to allow me to draw the nose exactly like I've already been taught. I'm going to start with that circle. He has kind of a bigger nose. He has a big circle in the middle, so I'm going to start with that circle, and I'm going to cross over my center line just to make sure my circle's right. And then he has really wide nostrils, so they don't really overlap at all. And I'm just going to draw that second circle, just like we did on the nose independent practices that you guys did. I'm building that nose by using the circles. And I'll just clean up anything, and that gives me just those basic shapes of his nose. Now I'm going to start going in and I'm going to start looking at those details and really like focusing down. He has this very round point before it comes up and it crosses across that line and then has a really big dark inside of his nostril. So I'll go through and I'll really make sure that's nice and dark, and I'm really paying attention to the shape of that nose. All right, so I have that nice big dark area, and then I'm going to start looking at that outside curve. So he has a pretty distinct outside curve, but then it really like flattens out. He doesn't really have a really defined nostril. It's really flat right there. So I'm just going to go in, I'm going to add that line and then erase the rest of it, so he really has that diagonal. And once again, I'm just using my eraser to kind of neaten it up. I'm just double checking to make sure that that nostril line goes to the right spot. And then I'm going to start really paying attention to any shading and value. I don't need to put all of the skin tone in. I just want to start making note of any areas where there's some pretty drastic value changes. His nose doesn't have a bunch of details, but I can add some of the darker stuff, like what falls right next to his nostril. There's definitely some like shading in there. The tip of his nose definitely has some shading. So I'm just going to go ahead and start adding some of that value. Not going too dark, not doing too much detail work. Just enough to kind of start giving me the illusion of that nose stuff. And I'm really paying attention to the details in my photograph. So once I'm happy with how it looks and I've really focused on making those measurements correct, I can go ahead and start preparing for the next step, which the next step is going to be, of course, adding the lips and the mouth and making sure that they're in the right place. So we've already kind of measured out exactly where that mouth goes. But we're going to go back and we're just going to like double check again, because it's always better to double check your work. So I'm going from that line on the nose, using that eye measurement, and I'm going to just drop it straight down and see exactly how far it is. And it's about 3/4 from the line of the nose down to the mouth. So I'm just double checking with my mouth to make sure that it's correct. And I did have the line drawn right. So now I'm going to figure out how far out the mouth goes. So similar to figuring out the width of the nose, I'm going to draw a line from the corner of my mouth up to my eye. So on your PowerPoint, add a line from the corner of your mouth straight up to your eye and figure out where the eye intersects. Mine intersects it right about the middle of the iris and pupil, so I'm going to draw that line lightly on my paper, just dropping straight down from that in order to show me exactly how far out it goes. So this is where my mouth will be. That's the width of my mouth. So you're going to draw the mouth the same way that we've been doing it, but of course you don't need to draw the other side. You only need this one side. Clive Owen has a very thin upper lip. He's also kind of smiling, kind of giving us a half smile in this, so that line is going to curve slightly. But he has a very thin upper lip, so I'm just adding that very slight upper lip that's there. His bottom lip is much thicker than his top lip, so I'm just going to add that kind of gentle curve to his bottom lip. And really, he doesn't have much going on with lips, but I can double check the width of that lip. It's about a half an eye length, so now I'm going to check the width of both of my lips put together. They're about a half an eye length, which means that I drew them correctly. Okay, so now that I have this, I'm going to kind of start paying attention to where those value changes start to happen. It's the exact same thing that you guys did in your independent practice. I'm going to start by darkening in these areas that are really dark on his mouth. He has that really dark center line, especially over towards the edge where that kind of smile hides. And then his upper lip is really, really faint, honestly. It's kind of hard to see even in the picture that I'm looking at. But I'm just going to add those value changes that I see there. There's not a ton happening. But I'm going to start gently shading in, go back and redarken up some areas, and then I'm going to start working on the bottom lip too. With this, it's really important that you pay attention to your person's lips, the shape of your person's lips, where's the shadows on them. Don't just fall into the idea that everyone has the same lips. Make sure you draw what you actually see. Don't draw what you think you see. So you really got to pay attention to the details. As I'm shading, I'm going through and I am not just shading one direction, I'm shading multiple directions. I'm really cross-hatching and I'm paying attention. So he has a little bit of a shadow on this bottom lip. and a little tiny bit of a reflection. And then I'm going to start giving that lip that texture, that line work that we learned about in the video on the lip drawing. So I'm just kind of adding in those things. You can also start adding some of the shading around the lip as well. That'll help give it some form. You don't need to shade all of the skin tone yet, but I'm going to start adding kind of the shadow that's underneath that bottom lip because it's really drastic and it really makes the lip actually stand out. So I'm going to go ahead and just start adding that. Like I said, you don't need to do all of the details around the face yet, but you do want to include some of those details in there for sure. So I'm just slowly working in some of that skin tone, but mostly I'm just focusing on just kind of building up the area around the lip and making sure that my lip value makes sense. And just darkening up. And then once you are happy with this, you need to take a picture of your drawing and make sure that it's on your drive because you need to submit it on the slides, which we're going to talk about right now, and that is how to turn in your work to Google Classroom. So like I said, I take a picture on my phone and then I download it onto my drive. Once you have it on your drive, you're going to pull up the same slides as what we've been using the past 2 days. So there's all the stuff that we've had before. Here's yesterday's assignment. I'm going to duplicate yesterday's slide assignment. I'm going to change that date to today's date so that I have the exact same thing, and I'm going to delete my drawing. And then I'm going to insert the image of today's drawing. So they insert the image that has the nose and the mouth drawn on it. So there's my picture. I'm going to go ahead and insert it. Mine is sideways, so I'm going to spin it. And then I'm also going to pay attention to placing it well. And I'm going to crop it so that there's no background stuff showing so that it's really just my drawing. Like I said, today needs to have obviously the eye from yesterday, but also it needs to have the nose and the mouth drawn on it too. And then I'm going to just crop it down, make sure it's really nice, and then make it a little bit bigger, make it kind of fill that space. So I should have that half face of the person, the reference photo, and then also the drawing as I have so far. And this is on the same slides as yesterday. When I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and go to Classroom in order to turn it in. Obviously, you guys will go to your class, but just to show you, you're going to go to your class, find the assignment, and then you're going to attach the item. So add item. You're going to Google Drive, recent, there's my slides. I'm going to go ahead and attach it. And then once it's done attaching, I'm going to simply turn it in and mark it as done. Okay, if you have any questions, reach out on Remind. As always, I'm always available to you guys. Remember, part of your grade is turning in the picture correctly using that slides that I showed you in the end. So make sure that you guys do that. Have a great day.